quickness of the defensive ends, the best perimeter pass rusher of all these defensive linemen. He's been consistently getting around the edge and getting home as a pass rusher. He's given these offensive tackles, a good group of offensive tackles, a lot of problems in the one-on-one drills, team drills, and everything else that he's done this week. I think Dee Ford is solidly moving up into that second day of the upcoming draft.
Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Huddle. I'm John Clayton for ESPN.com. Since becoming a starting cornerback, Richard Sherman of the Seahawks has considered it a personal insult to have somebody throw a fade pass against him. His rant against Michael Crabtree is in part because of the pride he takes in stopping the fade. Sherman's technique is to take away the space in front of a receiver and then use his 6'3" height to take away the ball. Pete Carroll put Sherman in a league with Hall of Fame cornerback Mike Haynes in being able to defend the fade. The tug of war in Super Bowl 48 is trying to determine whether it's better to be the number one offense or the number one defense. From 1984 to 2005, you needed a top 10 defense in fewest points allowed to win a Super Bowl. Peyton Manning changed that in 2006 by winning a ring with the 23rd ranked team for scoring. Eli Manning, Drew Brees, and Joe Flacco won rings without a top 10 defense. Pete Carroll and the Seahawks may be old school in trying to win with the number one defense, but he believes his formula might work. Peyton Manning is warming up to the idea of playing in a cold weather Super Bowl. With temperatures in New York projected to be in the 30s or below, Manning is trying to reverse an 0-4 playoff record with temperatures below 40 in the playoffs. In those 4 games, his completion percentage drops to 56.4, and his yards per attempt drop to a chilly 5.53. Expect Manning to attack the Seahawks defense with crossing routes and stacked formations to try to counter the Seahawks man-to-man defense. Colin Kaepernick's mission next season is to try to improve his throwing from the pocket during the playoffs. Against the Seahawks in the NFC title game, Kaepernick completed only 9 of 17 passes for 76 yards and 2 interceptions from the pocket. He connected on less than 60% of his pocket throws during the other 2 playoff games this year. But during the regular season, he ranked 5th with a QBR throwing from the pocket, completing 60.5% of his passes and having 16 touchdowns. Last year, he was 65.7% from the pocket during the regular season and having a 9.03 yards per attempt. That was best in the NFL in yards per attempt from the pocket. That's it for this week's edition for Inside the Huddle. Be back next week for the Super Bowl. Don't forget to watch the Insider Show. It's weekdays, 3 p.m., and you'll see it on ESPN. I'm John Clayton for ESPN.com.
Adrian Peterson, who it's another offseason, it's another surgery.
Yeah, his 3rd consecutive offseason in which he's had a surgery, and he's going to be 29 this offseason in March. He did have surgery today in Philadelphia with Dr. William Myers, and the Vikings have released a statement in which they say that everything went well, it was successful, he had an adductor muscle repaired, expected to make a full recovery in about 6 weeks. But these injuries can come with unexpected challenges. For instance, like Peterson, Cowboys defensive lineman Jay Ratliff had sports hernia surgery and an adductor muscle repaired by Dr. Myers. He also had a groin injury or an abdominal injury. And it's interesting to note that the Cowboys also thought he was coming back in 6 to 8 weeks. That was a prognosis. Instead, it led to a sequence of events in which he never played another down for the Cowboys and eventually was released and signed by the Chicago Bears. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Peterson, but it's just the kind of thing that you can keep in mind. There are some unknowns with these kinds of injuries.
Yeah, and you talk about Adrian Peterson at 29 years old. You know what happens to running backs when they turn 30, statistically.
And I think, Adrian Peterson, obviously a different sort of guy than a Jay Ratliff in terms of personality, character, etc. So maybe not those kinds of concerns if there were motivation concerns for Jay Ratliff in terms of getting back on the field. But one thing to watch with the Vikings is how dedicated they remain to an Adrian Peterson-centric offense. They still have a question to answer about quarterback, and they've gotten by the last couple of years by leaning very, very hard on this guy. Do they have to augment things at running back and get somebody to help him? Do they have to pass the ball more, and are they going to be able to do that Mike Zimmer has a lot of challenges in front of him, and the extent to which he can rely on Adrian Peterson to carry the offense is one thing to watch.
Well, Norv Turner is the offensive coordinator, and he knows how to use a running back and win championships. We saw that with Emmitt Smith. Stephen Davis was very effective with the Washington Redskins. LaDainian Tomlinson. He's had a lot of really good running backs throughout his career.
One thing we know about Adrian Peterson, he's a fast healer, and he's come back before better than before. So that'll be another interesting component as we move forward with Adrian.
At least he has timing on his side because it is early. There should be no reason, hoping there are no complications, that he is ready for 2014.
Man, we have the most outstanding fans in the world.
You're the best corner in the league?
Yes,
Your trash talk is a distraction to your teammates.
it doesn't distract anybody. It motivates.
Did you fight a lot as a kid?
Not everybody in Compton's gang.
You're in this league as a thug.
Thank you, guys.
I'm the man, I'm the man. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man.
Little brother is giving big brother some advice for Super Bowl 48. Eli Manning says he's going to give Peyton Manning some advice on how to play at MetLife Stadium, which is, of course, where Super Bowl 48 is. I'm Kerry Chow, joined by ESPN NFL insider Dan Graziano. Dan, what's Eli going to tell Peyton?
Well, he said he's got some advice for him on how to handle the windy and cold conditions at MetLife Stadium, if in fact those are a factor in Super Bowl 48. Eli, of course, plays his home games there as the quarterback for the New York Giants, and so he's able to share with him some secrets. He said he didn't want to tell us because he doesn't want Russell Wilson of the Seahawks to hear them too, so he plans to share them in private with Big Brother.
Is it weird when Big Brother, who's Peyton Manning, one of the best
Yes.
quarterbacks of all time, is getting advice from Eli Manning, who, of course, has 2 Super Bowl rings himself, so you can give that, some credit.
Well, as a Big Brother myself, I find this entire concept bizarre that you would take. No, I'm just kidding. The little brother has experience in the building. Problem is, what kind of experience is it? Eli Manning played the Seahawks at MetLife Stadium in Week 15, threw 5 interceptions in a 23-0 loss. So I'm not sure if Peyton Manning should be listening to this particular advice. But any little thing can help. Eli did say it's not as bad as the old stadium. Giants Stadium was very famous for being a tough place to play and throw and punt and all those things in the wind. And Eli said it's not quite that bad, but if it is a windy and cold day, there might be some local knowledge with which he can help his brother.
There's always been talk about Peyton Manning and cold weather. How do you expect the weather to affect this Super Bowl?
I don't think cold would bother him. I'm not even sure snow would bother him. I think if it's very, very windy, then that could be a factor because the Broncos like to throw the ball, and the Seahawks will run the ball, and they're a little more oriented that way. So I think if it is very windy on that night, it could be a disadvantage for Peyton Manning and the Broncos. They may have to adjust some things.
He's ESPN NFL insider Dan Graziano. You can check him out on NFL Insiders at 3 p.m. on ESPN. For Dan Graziano, I'm Kerry Chow. We'll see you later.
Physical versus finesse. Will that be the difference in Super Bowl 48? It's the subject of our centerpiece with Mark Brunell, who was part of the Saints title team over Peyton's Colts, Damian Woody, who was in New England for titles in 2001 and 2003, Kurt Steeler, Ryan Clark, who was part of Pittsburgh's title over Arizona. And let's start with the label itself. How does this play in the locker room if you're labeled as the bully or the finesse team?
I love being labeled a bully.
Yeah. This is the kind of thing that the Raiders should not overlook. They should not minimize. They should make sure that they understand what the law provides and what their exposure is. And there is significant exposure here for the team.
Leslie, you touched on the paltry sum of money these cheerleaders make. $1,250 per season. That works out to less than $5 per hour. From a legal standpoint, should they at least be paid minimum wage, which I believe is more than $7 an hour?
Yeah, I think the minimum wage in California is higher than we would anticipate. And if they were hired as hourly workers, then yes, they would be owed an awful lot of money. But I am sure they all signed contracts for the $1,250. But here the problem is the Raiders did not even pay the $1,250. If a judge looks at this and becomes indignant over the Raiders' behavior, he could then use the minimum wage as a way of determining how much the Raiders would pay. That would be a typical thing that a judge would do. So the minimum wage could be a factor in the trial of the case.
He's ESPN legal analyst Lester Munson. Lester, thanks for the insight.
Thank you, Jim.
Again, Raiders cheerleaders filing suit against the team. You can read more about this story right here on ESPN.com. With the latest ESPN headlines, I'm Jim Baskell.
Use Chase Freedom at gas stations this quarter and get 5% cash back. So you can keep rolling in style. Activate your 5% cash back at chase.com/freedom. Chase, so you can.
Damian Woody and Ryan Clark, a couple of Super Bowl vets, they didn't have to worry about cold weather interrupting their game. What's going through your mind, guys, as you actually hear, you gear up for kickoff at whatever time, what's going through your mind knowing that it might not happen when it's supposed to happen?
Well, as a football player, I thought we played football in any condition. You know, that's the first thing that's going through my mind, except lightning. Obviously, with lightning, you have to evacuate and clear out everything, but football is all terrain. You can play